really do think it's important to move on. People will get here undoubtedly. So, Shepard, how do you feel and what do you want to get out of today?
I feel great, I feel humbled, to be, part of the group, and be able to explore and expand, the way, our minds think, in fact, and, basically realize, right, in the greater, potential, that we have, to use our minds. So what I'm looking to get is, again, right, another piece, of that puzzle as we continue to grow, approaching it with a growth mindset. Manu, what do you feel, like, and what would you like to get from today's call?
Well, I feel grateful, and what I expect is to expand my envelope today.
All right, pass it
Henry,
on.
Henry too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Manu. Hey, I'm feeling great. What I expect is just being in the presence of greatness, learning from you guys, and even if I can get just one idea, one concept, find a little bit of clarity, I'm a happy lad. So just keeping it wide open and see what shows up. John, is John on? Yes, no, probably not. We'll throw it back to you, Kelly. Kelly, how do you feel? What are you going to get out of this?
Wow. Okay. How I feel is I'm absolutely grateful. I feel very excited that Manu made this call. Manu and I have been studying together for years and years and years. And in a lot of ways, Manu echoes more than anybody else my thinking on Fuller. And that's why we get on so well. I mean, I met Manu when he was in Phoenix, and I actually gave him the book Synergetics, thinking, oh, well, I'll get this guy off my back. He'll get this book and he'll put it in his hands and he'll say, oh, this guy's crazy. Well, Manu went home and read it. And so,
Yeah.
want to know who's crazy? It's not me. And ever since, he's been one of the main contributors on a Wednesday night call we have. And we have a Wednesday night call that's all over the world. And it's night my time, afternoon Manu's time, morning US, South America time. And we get people coming in and out of that call. And we get to the point where we become very demanding of each person on the call to lead the call down or into a path that they want to follow, with things that they want to understand. And Manu has a huge background in exploration and understanding the geology of the planet. And so he brings a very interesting flavor, if you like, to this. Shepard, I think in a lot of ways you bring a lot of technology flavor to the call, I would say. Or are you more a geologist as well?
No, telecommunications, communications,
yeah.
Right, networks.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, and it's so very important to understand the importance of that, because each one of us says we want to expand who we are. And so one of the things I want to get out of this call is this idea, by the way, Shepard, after this call, I'm wanting to convince you there's no such thing as mindset. There's a mind frame, but the very thing that we laugh and joke about is this thing called little voice.
Right. Yeah.
And we're constantly, and we even say to ourselves, shut up, little voice. That's the biggest load of nonsense out. It's we have this mind that's constantly feeding us things. And I think that I'm supported by what Fuller says.
Yeah.
And I think that the second we get into this idea that there's a mindset, and religions and governments sporting organizations. They want to convince us that we have a mindset. And what I would put to you, one of the things that I want to get across tonight or this morning is the idea of radiation and gravity, and how, as a positive thing, we go out and we radiate. And the second we radiate, the very moment we do that, there's only one thing that can happen. Manu, what's the only thing that can happen to us as we radiate out?
We heat up.
Yeah, we heat up. And then what's the only thing that happens once you heat up?
Cool down.
So you've got entropy. As you go out, you radiate out. It's entropy, isn't it?
Yep.
So you can't get less entropy. People trying to get less entropy, it's not going to happen. The more you divide something, the more entropy you get. And the only thing that entropy is going to do is cool down. It's going to come, and what it'll coalesce into is a critical mass.
Yes.
And so, in my view, what we're looking for is critical mass of regenerative processes. And that's a mouthful, really, in and of itself. But we know that the more we throw something out, as it's moving out, it's warm. As it comes back to us, it's cooled down. That's all the stuff around the laws of thermodynamics. And it's not out there, it's here. If it's a generalized principle, it has to apply to all of us. Have I put that reasonably okay, Manu, or would you like to add to it?
Well, I mean, what is that is always a duality. You know, as you are radiating out, there's gravitation that is bringing back in somewhere. And it's always in a state of permanent flow. And that's what I think Kelly was trying to kind of communicate here.
So it's exactly that. It's always in a state of permanent flow. Even when it gathers together, it's going to either be regenerative as it moves away and goes into another cycle, because it will be a cycle, and that cycle creates patterns of behaviors over time. And one of Fuller's quotes that you never hear very much of is because it's very hard to understand. He's one of his quotes are, if you wait long enough, you'll see all the gears of the universe. Right? And so what we know right now, or what we think we know, is that with the poles, the Earth is spinning, and as those poles move in and out of this 23 degrees, or whatever it is that they move, or what we think they measure and move, all of a sudden you're looking at that. And as they talk about that cycle, how long do they say that cycle is?
I don't know, Kelly. How long do you think?
I don't know.
Well, they suspect it's 26,000 years.
Wow.
So we're talking about a planetary cycle that cycles in 26,000 years. And the average mind that's developed in this body lasts how long? Our contribution lasts how long?
100 years if you're lucky.
Well, it goes from zero. Do we learn from a life? Do we learn from that zero to what we know is around 116 years? Are we learning something between those 2 points?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. But we don't have anyone that has the point from 0 to 26,000.
Right.
Yet we get into all of this stuff, and we start to go there. So I want to really get people to understand this. This is what I want to get out of today. Last week, Jeff on the call said, well, it's almost frustrating not knowing what an individual can do.
Right.
And so I went, Henry actually gave me a very different task for this week. And I thought, no, I want to address this issue that very few people really want to address. And that's what's the responsibility of this individual as viewed through Fuller's eyes, because this is a Fuller study group. So I have my opinion, and I have my opinion on what Fuller is saying. I think he says it. Whenever I think of something and I have a phrase, I'll either put that phrase in critical path or synergetics. And to my surprise, without fail, there's an explanation. I have not failed to get an explanation when I go to, that fits me. So either that says I'm understanding Fuller more, or I'm getting into a mind space that he was developing. The other way, it doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is that I'm aware and I'm conscious of that. Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, the other thing is, I'm always about application. I'm really not that interested in people telling me what they can do or what they think or what their opinion is. What I actually want to know is, have you applied it? And if you applied it, what happened with your application? And so a lot of the things that you'll see me, the thing JDS. JDS is me, and my pseudonym is John Struggledorf, because I think we all struggle. And I think if you say to someone in a business sense, if you say, oh, I'm struggling, people don't want to do business with you. I don't know any business that doesn't struggle, including the big ones.
Yep.
But nobody admits that. Nobody really goes out and says, well, there's this, and struggle is just another word. And to me, there is always this, in my mind, there's this idea that universe, it's got to be this way, or universe got to be. To me, universe is indifferent. It really is what's going on there. And if you're moving towards whatever is evolving in that space, you'll be okay. If you're not, guess what? It doesn't matter whether it's business, doesn't matter whether it's economics, whatever. If you're not aware enough to be spinning in this space and moving along the way it is, there's a good chance you won't survive. And someone might say, oh, we've lost a good man, he was before his time. So what? So what, you're before your time? Let's be in time and see what we can do. Does that make sense to everyone? Is everyone okay with that? Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, I really am one of these guys that's quite democratic, if you like, about what I do. Okay. So, who wants to be the reader today?
I can read.
Okay, Manu, you read, and this Manu prepared this. I picked it up out of the book, but this is fundamentally Manu's thinking. And am I okay if I contribute to it, Manu?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you stop where you think you need to stop, and then people can ask explanations. Is that okay?
All right.
Okay, go ahead. Go for your life.
Okay, my reasons for writing this book are fourfold. Because I'm
That's
convinced
Fuller's reason,
that,
by the way.
yeah. Because I'm convinced that human knowledge by others or what this book has to say is essential to human survival. A. B. Because of my driving conviction that all of humanity is in peril of extinction. If each one of us does not dare, now and henceforth, always to tell only the truth and all the truth, and so promptly right now. C, because I'm convinced that humanity's fitness, continuance in the cosmic scheme no longer depends on the validity of political, religious, economic, and social organizations.
Or social.
Yeah, that's what I say. All social organizations, which altogether heretofore have been assumed to represent the many. Any comment there?
Any comments on that so far?
So when he
Okay.
talks about truth, he talks about universal truth, because all other truth it's always evolving. You know, the opinions, you know, it may be a fact today, but facts change. Like, you know, the world was flat at one stage, but then the truth came out. No, it's actually not, wasn't.
Okay, so Henry, if you take that and you say to yourself, let's just look at language, just look at words for there.
Yeah.
For a start, if we look at what fact means, it means it's a fact. It's true, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's true in all cases. What
Right.
Fuller would say is it's a principle, and a universal principle to Fuller is true in all cases, no
Yes.
exceptions.
Yeah.
And so when we look at the language of science, I doubt whether very many people even understand the difference between a hypothetical and a theoretical. Because that's really what you're talking about right now. And that's really what we're talking about, truth and facts. You know, what's the difference between a hypothesis and a theory?
A hypothesis is an attempt, to explain a phenomenon, whereas a theory, I think, is a set of understood principles, that have stabilized, through collection of knowledge and information. That's my attempt.
I think that's pretty close. When we go to hypothetical, we say hypothetical is almost what if we put all these conditions together, what would happen? And hypothetically, we say we think this would happen. That's hypothetical. Theoretical is after you've done a lot of tests and it's proven, and it says, well, theoretically this works, but it's still not a fact or a principle. It's theoretically it's working. And then that goes in as a working model to be disproved. Does that make sense, Manu?
Yes.
Theories are out there as saying this is a working model that we've proved. Now disprove it. That's what science looks to do, is disprove something theoretically. A principle, or in my view, a fact, remains. And unless we can get that specific in our language, I quite often hear people saying, well, hypothetically, and what they really mean is theoretically, and when they say theoretically, they really mean hypothetically. And I think it's important that we really understand that. So again, in my view, it's very important. Fuller is very precise with his language. He said, I'd rather be not understood than misunderstood.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really very important that as you're going through, so people are talking about science right now. And as they talk about the science, they're giving us all their hypotheticals. It's like, okay, well, hypothetically, what about that? And, it's blah, 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 blah. And simply put, this climate group of people are saying, here are the theoreticals. Here are the theoreticals of what's going on. Now it's a matter of testing, proving, evaluating, and moving towards a much better regenerative process. And I think we can get lost in the argument. And so all of a sudden, do we need to be precise in our words?
Yes.
Yeah. So the other thing, from the three statements, that's, sort of popping up, and I was looking for it. And I think he says, a continuance in the cosmic scheme. So there is a scheme through which, these humans ended up, right in the universe. And then he's saying, none of those labels or groupings right, that are there, whether it's political, or religious, or economic, or social organizations, can do anything if they remain on the same trajectory, to save humans from extinction.
Okay, so right now, what is that, a theory or a hypothesis? When he wrote this book, what was it, a theory or a hypothesis?
Hypothesis, I would say.
Yeah. And now what's it becoming?
It's becoming theory because we are realizing it.
Yeah, we're starting to we're starting to realize, hey, there's some shit going on here.
Yeah.
We opened this call by a guy in South Africa, knowing some guy in Queensland is a very close friend of his, working for many years, for me to say to him, hey, his property's on fire because it's way too warm. And this guy, the guy we're talking is about, is not only a geologist, he's a geoscientist, he's geopolitical. And so, you know, he's connected to all of these things, and he's saying, oh, this stuff's really going on. And so it's very real now. It's now we've got to we've got to dance with the theories and get rid of all this hypothetical nonsense. So I take your point on 1, 2, and 3 is really what you're saying is that we need to be much clearer. But what is most of the language that's being used? Let's go to 5. Manu, read where the yellow
just before you go to 5, can I add to this fire story in Queensland? You know, right?
Yeah.
You know, you've got one of the people, you know, that built, you know, right, you know, that built a system which they are using, not probably, which they are definitely using to get updates as to how this fire is moving and development. It's called the National Emergency Warning System, right? I had a group of engineers and we put that in place, you know, a few years back in 2013. Anyway, carry on. I thought I'll just add to, you know, to the story of the fire.
Well, and it adds to the credibility of one shepherd. Well done, mate. Let's go to 5. I think we can go individual action, but read number 5, Manu.
Okay, the individuals never join in action with others as motivated only by crowd-engendered emotionalism or by sense of the crowd's power to overwhelm, or in fear of holding to the course indicated by one's own intellectual conviction.
Okay, so guess what? What's happening to us right now? You can almost be as certain of what's going on all over the planet. Somewhere is what's going on. What's it going? What's happening?
More awareness.
How about crowd-engendered emotionalism?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never joining actions with others as motivated by crowd-engendered emotionalism.
Yeah.
By the sense of crowd's power to overwhelm. See, fundamentally, we're in a critical mass place right now, in my view. It's just my view, that the crowd doesn't know which way critical mass is going to go. Is it going to go economic, social? Is it going to go politically, democratic, autocratic, kleptocratic? It's looking at all of those things. It really, it's now got to coalesce into what it wants to be. And he said this is written in the early 80s. And now look what we're looking at. Tell me that that's not exactly what's going on. Crowd-engendered emotionalism.
Yes.
Mm.
Well, you see it.
He's
You see
warning
it in
about
Hong Kong. You see it in London, all around the world.
Venezuela, you name it. You're seeing it. You're seeing this emotionalism. And at some moment, yes, we're emotionally driven. And sooner or later, it's what he says in most of his writings, we know a little bit about something. And maybe we can grow that little bit that we know and use the technology the way you just expressed, Shepard. We can use it for doing really the what if scenarios. So to give you an understanding of my understanding of the fire where John's at, the fire gives them a warning, and 10 minutes out they say it's either leave or stay. And at this moment, it's like you need to stay close to these warnings. At this moment, we're not mandating you leave. We're saying that it may be advisable to leave. It's your choice right now. So they have different levels, right?
Yeah, certainly. So what they do is, you know, we do a geographic fencing of the area where the fire is, and then we obtain all the, you know, the mobiles that are in that particular area, and then there's an emergency warning system which is monitoring, including, you know, the fire services as to, you know, all the conditions, prevailing conditions, you know, about the fire, you know, right? The rate at which it's moving, wind, and all those type of things, right? And then also, you know, the escape routes, which way, you know, people should be going, or moving animals. So all those updates keep coming, you know, right? You know, they are being told all that information, you know, right? So it's a combination of, you know, a lot of data, you know, that is being used to advise people, you know, right? You know, the criticality of where they are, whether they are in harm's way or which way they can go. Otherwise, sometimes people will be running towards the fire, and right, that was disastrous, right, in the past.
Manu, are you able to explain that in terms of entropy and syntropy? What Shepard just said.
Yes, I mean, there is entropy, and
so what's all the entropy?
Pardon?
What's the entropy in what Shepard just explained?
Entropy is just expansion of the space.
Okay. So when all of a sudden when he goes out to the market with their app and says, "Okay, everybody, listen. Here are all the data points. We're spreading them out. We're letting you know. We're radiating that information." Would you say
yes.
that now is okay? We're going out. We're radiating out, right?
Yes.
And then in the next part of it, it comes in and he says, "Stand by. We'll reevaluate later." That means that a lot of the information points change. They cool down and they go out and they radiate again. So it has to, the very nature of what goes out starts to cool down and comes in, and you re-aggregate the data. Would you say, Shepard?
Yeah, exactly. And also you find the interaction, right? In as much as the emergency warning system is collecting data and sending it to the people that are in the affected area, the people in the affected area are also sending updates, because they are collecting data, right? They can see, right? So, all that then, gets, correlated and, and matched so that, effective information, but there is the interaction between the two parties, so that, right, it's an enriched, set of information that, everyone is using.
Okay, so.
And what you are saying there, Shepard, is when you say, okay, hold on, we've reevaluated the thing, that is, it is anti-entropic. You have put an anti-entropic something. That is always local, anti-entropic.
Yeah.
Now there's the other notion of syntropic, that's what we're talking about. That is follows the normal cycle.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, and the other reality is, can I give you 4 stars?
Yep.
Okay, we want to now go to the Fuller's 4 stars on thinking. What are we thinking about? The first thing that we're thinking about is all the space, right? The next thing that we're thinking about is the movement, the energy in the space. So space, energy. Now what we're looking at is relationship, 3, and 4, interrelationship. Those are the 4 things that you're thinking about. Am I reasonably correct, Shepard?
Yep. Yes.
Space, movement, relationship, and interrelationship.
Correct.
Bang.
Absolutely. Yes.
And I have to think about all of that straight away.
Yes.
And that's why it's so important. You can't leave any of those things out. Okay, so now what you're saying is, now let me give you another 4-star thought. Shepard, do you store that information?
It's stored in servers, right?
Yes, it's stored. So
yeah.
I'm not saying you specifically. That system stores information, yes?
Yes, it does.
Does it aggregate the information?
Absolutely.
Okay, so now, can it retrieve that information?
Yes, it
can.
Can
It re-aggregate that information?
Yes.
So when you're thinking about information, you have to think about those 4 points of information. Store, retrieve, aggregate, and re-aggregate.
Yes.
Those are 4 points of thought when you're building that system. Am I correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And what you're looking on, now the other side of it, we've discussed things like atomic time.
Yeah.
People don't get it. They're still working on railway time. They're still thinking, oh, the train's coming. I'm going to get the Doppler effect. It's coming towards me. The problem is it's all around you people.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yep.
You're not working with the Doppler effect when you're talking about what you're talking about. Does everyone understand what the Doppler effect is?
I do.
Yeah, explain it, Shepard. Am I reasonably clear?
Now you're clear. So basically, the Doppler effect is, like when you're listening to
the Doppler. Okay.
Yeah, you know, you're listening to an ambulance when it's coming towards you. You know, the sound, you know, gets louder, right? And as it, you know, as it passes you, it gets, you know, it dies off. You know, so it's the cumulative effect of the sound waves, or you know, information waves coming to a particular point. So in this particular case, you have got you know, a raging fire, you know, a raging situation. You have got, you know, rescuers, or fire service, you know, personnel trying to, you know, to intervene. And you have got, you know, the movement of people, and, you know, right, and animals, you know, right. Okay, houses are not moving, you know, but they are, you know, they are either sitting in the path, or you have got sprinklers going, and all this sort of information, right, is changing by the second.
It's not linear, people. It's radial.
Yeah.
And the information, the sensorial points are radial points.
Yeah.
They're all over the place. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah.
And so when you start to see it now design in your mind. It's like, oh, I'm storing, I'm going to get a mindset on that information. I've stored it. Too late. It's already finished.
Yeah.
The information that these guys are collecting is too late. That's because there's 9 billion opportunities in a vibration inside a second. And what's happening when Shepard's talking about what they created, they're working on vibration. Mm-hmm. Am I correct, Shepard?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All those little sensors are vibrating for you, and all it is connected now to your fingers and your mind, for gosh sakes.
Yeah.
Okay, is everyone with me so far? Are you learning something here, Henry?
Oh, yeah.
No, you're not. It's like it's how do you apply this information that I'm interested in, right? Okay, so now let's see. So I give you a little bit of struggle, Dork. You can read it or not. You want to read it quickly, Manu, or not?
Okay. It is a unity relationship between brain and mind. The brain stores information that is later sent to a stream of conscious beingness, and minds start to relay the information signals that are sent. By understanding this design, it leads me to believe we are designed to gather information from omni-experience, creating an inventory of experiences to relate to each other. This becoming the moment of choice. Choose a different maker in the life of Homo sapiens when compared to energies.
So that's the difference between us and other energy, is we gather, so we store, and we can retrieve it, we can relate it, and we can interrelate it. And what a surprise, we designed this whole computer system that does exactly the same as we do, only more efficiently because it doesn't have emotion to it.
Yeah.
What a surprise. And so you can see the pictures. And for those that are watching this or may watch it in the future, today they talk about 7 senses. Does everyone realize that there's 7 senses? Manu and I studied this a few weeks ago. Right? So most of the people know the average senses, and then there's these other senses that help us to relate to what's going on, 6 and 7. Okay, so we go past that. Now let's go to Fuller's talking on it right there. Our individual, please, Manu.
Okay, our individual brains coordinatingly integrate all the ever different sensings of our different faculties. The integrated product of our multifold individual sensings produces awareness. Only through our sensings are we aware of the complementary otherness.
Okay, now you explain what he means by complementary otherness, Manu, because most people won't really understand that from a physics point of view.
Okay. If we just go to the beginning of this sentence, our individual brains coordinatingly integrate all the ever sensings of our different faculties. We have all of those senses that are taking in information. That information is stored, is multifold in terms of is partially overlapping. It is there. It is in relationship. And
Are they particles or waves?
they are both.
Yes, but when they're gathering them, as when you're looking at the otherness, that's what complementarian is, whether it's a wave or a particle, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're starting to look at this thing, you got all these gatherings of particles and they're flowing in a wave.
Yeah.
Is that similar to what we were thinking, Manu?
Yes. They are flowing in patterns. In patterns. In actual fact, fuller things, I think that there is no such thing as a finite body that is either solid or whatever. There are always patterns. You get what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And I doubt whether anyone else is going to get it.
No, I mean it's similar to to what the if fractal geometry, right? And the interconnectedness, right, of of that scheme, and where you see even the creation of layers, right, within those systems. So yeah, so, I think I think I'm following what he's saying.
Okay, so you understand complementary is a physics term.
Yeah, complementary otherness.
Yes, and that's, and what in physics, it's the wave or the particle or both.
Yep.
It's actually dualities.
Duality.
Yes.
That's why it's important to understand unity is plural at a minimum of
Two.
two. Okay, keep going, Manu.
Awareness of the otherness is the information. The complex of successively experienced information produces interweaving episodes. And the complex of special case episode interweaving produces the scenario that our brain memory bank identify as our individual's being's life.
So does that apply to your design on your warning system, Shepard?
It definitely does. It definitely
Case
does, because
episodes
what we are
interweaving.
saying is, yes, yeah. So the presence of certain information, means the absence of other information, with either which you can expect or which you don't know.
Yeah, right?
Shepard, well, let me ask you, did you watch the final World Cup rugby?
Yes.
How do you remember that event?
I remember it as as South Africa basically beating England and basically out maneuvering England, right, at the game. What England did to the All Blacks, right, is what South Africa did to England.
Okay. I remember it as a 2 tries.
The 2 tries.
Yes, that's the way I remember it.
On either side of the field, by the way.
Yep.
One down the left and one down the right, or one moving along. I shouldn't say down. One moving along the left left field line, and one moving along the right field line. They spread them wide.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's what my brain has banked.
And not only that, when they started the game strategically, they moved into the center of the field. When they played the game before that, they moved the center. They moved the space in the center.
Yeah.
And the English were not, by the end of the game, strategically, South Africa was bringing on their power at this end of each game they played, and they went wide. They used the whole space. And England was still playing in the middle of the field. That's why they got caught on both sides of the field, because they expected South Africa strategically to move in the middle.
Yeah.
Am I close, Manu?
Yes.
See, that's looking at it from a space point of view. And they pounded that for 2 games. And the last thing England expected was left and right along the lines. and they made him look silly. Anyway, is that does that give you? That's what I remember of it, Manu. Sorry.
Yes. I mean, the expectation is that England was going to play South Africa the way they play New Zealand.
Yes.
England muted New Zealand, basically.
Yeah, and England didn't strategically play and understand what South Africa did it time and time again. Fundamentally, the only team that probably could have beat them was New Zealand, because New Zealand played that similar sort of game. But anyway, this is a little map that I drew because I'm right in.
I think this map is important, you know, into kind of highlighting what we've been talking about.
Okay, so a lot of things that I've been taught, and again, we do a lot of business study and all the rest of it, and we've heard all these universities come out with this word formula, and they say all words only represent 7%, voice is only 38%, and your body is 55%. But there's no explanation. It's just take it on board. And so to me, I would tell you, in my view, filters are a generalized principle of the universe. There's always something being filtered. And it doesn't really matter. The more I think about filters, the more I realize filters are everywhere. And when you get the concept of duality about brain stores, mind relates, but you see this going all around our body. Our body is filled with filters. Fundamentally, the difference between the colors of Manu and Shepard and Henry and myself are filters, skin filters. And where you're related to the sun as the earth spins. And so it's just pure filtering of something, filtering sunlight or filtering, you know, the contaminations. And part of our problem I see on the planet is our filters are clogged. And what we're trying to say is, instead of saying, look, we've got all of this stuff and it's moving too fast, how do we slow it down? How do we filter it? Because it's a filter. And when you start to see this, our brain is receiving, our mind is receiving through its sensorial pads. It's no different to what, Shepard, what you're talking about, all the points, data points you measure. Our body's full of data points and we're measuring them. Where's it getting stored? As far as we know, it's stored all along our body, but it's really stored in the brain to relate to the mind. So now all of a sudden it relates to the mind. And when the mind is doing that, it's sensing, relating, integrating, and all of a sudden you've got all these filters going on. And we genuinely have a lot of filters, but you don't really hear people talking about the filtration of information.
Yeah, and it's filters that give us the ability, you know, to gain traction, you know, right, and even make sense of some of the information around us. For example, like, you know, I think as you are showing, I would say in the clear areas, there are other, you know, there's other information that is taking place there, which perhaps we don't even have, you know, the filters that, you know, yet, and even our filters are continuously updating and changing and adjusting. So because it's a dynamic environment, right, overwhelmed by the amount of data and you know that could be exchanged. But however, we use the filters, you know, to be able to understand it.
Yeah, and here's more to the point, Shepard. Universe has no space. It is space.
Yeah.
The second we draw that circle or that area around and call it framing map formula for communication brain mind, we're actually drawing a circle and creating space.
Exactly.
Universe is space. So it's spaceless.
Yeah.
We put the space in the space. Does that make sense to you?
It does. I mean, like, you know, giving the analogy of this, you know, the fire systems, you know, that we are talking about. It's only a limited number of sensors, you know, can be placed in that environment. For example, right, you know, there's nothing that is monitoring, you know, the flying set of flames, you know, that are crossing roads, you know, right? Because there's one tree and one branch, you know, which is, with the presence of wind, now crosses the road, and then you're imagining, how did that fire cross the road? But the mechanism is there. Now no one is monitoring that. All you then see is the result that, oh, now the fire is on the other side of the road. We thought this road was going to be a barrier, but oops, it's not working, because of the conditions, So therefore, you now take that new information, but it's with, it's after the event. There's no mechanism which was monitoring, that, that there's a possibility or when it actually happened. So there's too much information that we can, we can be picking, but we can only use a limited set of sensors.
Okay, so Shepard, what does fire need to keep burning?
Fuel, oxygen.
Oxygen.
Yeah. Yep.
You take all its oxygen, and guess what happens to fire?
Goes out.
Burns out. So one of the crucial ways of dealing with fire is the backburner.
The fire.
It burns all the oxygen. It takes it out, so it's got nothing to feed it.
Yes. Yeah.
And so when we start to look at that, we start to say, okay, here are our plans. So undoubtedly, somewhere in there, you're going to be measuring oxygen as it relates to the fire.
That's correct.
Well, one of the effective ways of putting or controlling a fire is to create another fire, a controlled fire.
Exactly,
Yes,
because
Yep.
it eats the fuel.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about the winds and everything else, it's like, it's a very, in a lot of ways, that's why we have to be thankful for the firefighters, because those guys are intuitive monitors.
Yes. Yes.
So where you can have the support of your mechanism, you have the people on the ground that are intuitive monitors making decisions based on the information you provide them.
Yes. So I suppose that's, it's similar to what Fuller is saying regarding our very own existence, right? That we have got all this information, and as humans, unless we collaborate and use that and become aware of the information, right, then we are going to be bent, as if we're, in a fire situation. But that's how we go, that's how we go extinct. And yet we need to collaborate and become aware of that information and use it in a way that allows us, to remain, in existence.
Yes, that's it. Anyway, I drew this because I got so fed up with people writing, oh, I'm clever. Words are 7%, voices 8%. And then I had to test it. Do you know why I stopped saying what you feel like saying? I really don't give a shit what you feel like saying. What I want to know is how you feel. I don't want to give you the oxygen of the stage and say, oh, fill your boots, baby. No, tell me how you feel. Now, tell me how you think. And if you get into that, now you're going to get into Fuller's favorite poem in the book. What's the favorite poem?
Cummings.
Can you see it?
Yes. Yeah.
The Poet's Advice.
Yeah. A poet's advice. Yeah.
And so what he's saying, when we begin, I want people to get used to the idea of how do you feel? And then what do you think? Because what you think, you're a collective of everything around you, your circumstance, your events, your happenings, your vital now, you're all of those things. But the point is, when you say honestly how you feel, that's who you are. That's what right now. And it's moment by moment by moment. And so as we start to look at this, if people go through the book, this is not what I'm saying. This is in critical path. And so, Manu, I've put out these yellows to correspond with the yellow at the top. What do they say?
Okay, in a word in which, in a word which is doing its best night and day to make you everybody else.
We're making people everybody else. And we're feeling helpless about it. Okay, so what does he say?
Because nothing is quite as easy as using words like somebody else, where all of us do exactly this nearly all of the time. And whenever we do it, we are not poets.
We are not intuitive self. And so when people say, oh, I feel helpless, I can't, it's because you know this thing about the crowd engendered noise. And at some moment, there's all this crowd engendered noise. What are you going to do? And
They're
so,
counting the likes on Facebook.
okay. So now,
Conformity, yes.
Should I continue somewhere?
yeah, let's go down and here's his, I mean, how subtle is this? The Lord's Prayer. Now,
Yeah.
we're not going to get to go through this, but this is the mind of the individual being intuitive. And so when you read it, this is the part that Manu brought to our meeting, and I thought, you know, I've read this 100 times, and I've never read it the way that we read it the other night. And then I thought, oh my gosh, there's something here that we really need to understand. There's something that's being said, and it's so obvious. I ignore it. And so now I'm saying, okay, well, hang on a second. Let's study what it's saying. So Manu, go ahead.
Okay, from where?
That is what I'm thinking about is.
Okay, that is what I'm thinking about ever rethinking the Lord's Prayer. It is also what I'm thinking about in volume 2 of Synergetics. I think it is probably an intuitive awareness of the possible variety of parts of all of the foregoing that makes the theologists disregard the scientists' brain-induced requirement of a cosmic beginning and ending. All scientists have brains. Brains always and only coordinate the special case information progressively apprehended in pure principle by the separate senses operating in pure mathematical frequency principle. Brain then sorts out the information to describe and identify special whole system characteristics, storing them in the memory bank as system concepts for single or multiple recall for principles seeking consideration and reconsideration as system integrities by searching and ever reassessing mind. Only minds have the capability to discover principles. Once in a very great while, scientists' mind discover principles and put them to discover
rigorous
physical tests before accepting them as principles. More often, theologists and others discover principles, but do not subject them to the rigorous physical special case testing before accepting and employing them as working assumption principles. Principles are eternal. Special case interaction of principles are temporal and brain apprehensible because in pure principle we have time, which is simply the principle of potentiality, different relative frequencies, and not of beginnings and endings.
Wow. So what do you think that means, Shepherd?
I think, you know, it manages to confuse me because we are talking about principles that are eternal, and then we have got different relative frequencies and not of beginnings and endings. So trying to, you know, to marry the two.
What he's saying is you live in, let me say it the way Chaos says it. In the book Chaos, they say you have infinite possibilities, finite space. Space of the universe is finite. The means the one and only. So one is universe. There's no space. It is the universe. Boom. Now create space. But
entropy is infinite possibilities.
And entropy is the infinite possibilities. But it'll always come back to, that's this idea that it will twist, evolve, twist, turn, do all those things that are fundamental movements, and it'll keep going. It'll keep moving forward. It evolves. It doesn't change. Changes in a moment, evolves over time.
Is there any
I think
idea
another-
of defining the dimensions of that space, that single space?
Well, you define it by drawing the circle.
Right.
So it's always
But-
expanding.
So it could be infinite.
Yeah, but the infinite is not space. Infinite is possibility. How much can you fit into that space? And all that the new dimensions of time have caused is a density in a time space. It's just so much more dense, right? Think of all the things that are happening that we can measure as we're doing this call. Think of where this call could go to. Think of where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And so now we have to really start to develop our minds. And as we're developing our minds, it's like the information that you're providing on your Fire app or the weather service and the Fire app, it's still relying on the intuitive individual to make decisions.
But I think there's more here in terms of in relationship to what he said in the poet's advice. You know, when he says, the scientist, once in a while, will discover in principle, but the scientists will in time test it before.
And they'll keep testing.
Yes, as a principle.
Whereas
the others, they might trip on it and they just accept it or reject it, or accept it more often accept it in kind of justification of something else.
Feedback is a principle of universe. Action, reaction, resultant.
Yes.
And we want to make it some economic thing about, feedback. Feedback is a principle of universe. There is constant noise and it's echoing and it's feedbacking. Does that make sense, Shepard?
Makes sense. I think what's troubling me is, the scientists are trying to understand a cosmic scheme through testing of principles that they are discovering, and yet the cosmic scheme is already in existence and it's doing, certain principles. So maybe it's somewhere else, where he talks about that.
It's
this one,
fundamentally easier than that, Shepard. You're making it more than what it is. You're making what it isn't. Most scientists are working on an economic assumption, not a cosmic assumption.
Okay.
The second you get away from, if you look at now, one of the 6 things that they said in this new climate change thing, they made it the 6th or 4th or 5th point is environment before economy. What one of the poisoning pollutants are, it's economy before environment. And when you hear this absolutely abusive, obscene, belligerent language of most of the economic language, what you're getting is making it right because it's economic. It's not cosmic principally based.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that explains it then. Yeah, that's fine. Right. I think.
Okay, but if you see it like that, though, what it means is all of us are aware that the language that the politicians are using, the banks are using, corporations, we're all aware that there's something going on. Intuitively, we understand that. There's something in us that doesn't move. And that's what this book is really about. It's about saying, hang on, think for yourself.
So,
okay, so we can go into this, but we're getting over. We're going to go back to this next week.
All right. Yes. All right. Yeah.
We'll get back to where we are, and we'll start to look at it and just see how we're going. Johnny Butler, are you here now? No, maybe not. Okay, so Shepherd, how do you feel and what do you take away from today?
Thank you, Kelly. What I'm feeling invigorated, right, and also challenged as usual, right, that whether it's me or is the scientist, I've got this visualization of walking into a library, right, which is full of information, but my ability to either use all that information or where to start to use all that information and then make sense of it, can be overwhelming. But at the same time, we are getting a framework, which one can use to start interacting, because that, say in my library scenario, that this information is in certain categories, so we can retrieve it and begin to use it and assimilate it depending on the prevailing situation. But it's the provocation of these thought processes at this particular level which is quite intriguing, for me. So it feels good. It feels, right, out of the comfort zone, but that's fine, right? Exciting. Henry, what do you feel and what do you think?
Hey, I'm feeling great. There's some really good points that come out. I mean, you cover a lot in terms of a very wide space and in areas that you just don't talk to on a daily basis. I mean, some of the points that I like the 4 points: space, relationship, energy, interrelationship, and then using that and applying it. So look at the space. How does the space, how is that going to be filled? Energy, how does that move in and out? Flow. Those are things that I'm constantly looking at now, which is really good. I also like the concept that, critical mass of regenerative processes. Looking for more examples of that because they're appearing every day. So the more awareness of that, the better it is. So yeah, really neat. Really enjoying it. Manu, how do you feel and what did you take away from today?
I feel in and aware of an environment. And what I would like to take away from this really, learning how to fix more. It's a little bit way out, but if I put a tree, I must plant three. That's what I take practically from this gathering. And it's also kind of another special case. But in this call, in this call, that's something new to me. So that's what I think and I will do out of this. And you, Kelly, how do you feel? What do you take away?
The first thing, I feel very, very grateful to Shepherd and Manu because they fundamentally made this call by their life experiences, their special cases, and we were able to demonstrate exactly what's going on in a very specific circumstance. So Manu, when you talked about entropy moving out, it's easy for people to talk all this radiation out. But all of a sudden, we get this conversation where we say at a macro level, the macro of this is a burning fire on a friend's property. So macro, burning fire, friend's property, micro. And then we were able to apply some of our thoughts, some of Fuller's thoughts, by going macro, micro. When you're going macro, it's entropic. And when people say, oh, you got to be positive, you got to be positive, you got to, look, let me tell you for nothing, and this is free for anyone that watches. If you keep going out, you'll burn out. You'll eventually burn into a crisp. What you have to do is understand you're moving out, coming back into a specific place and relating it, going out, or interweaving. We're saying, well, how does that fit with what's going on? What am I learning? Because it's all really about the feedback, and the feedback is a result of energy moving in a defined space. And if we can understand that, and we can have it as a way of thinking, we might look at problems differently than having to jump off car parks, get brain damage, and die.
Mm.
That to me is exactly what's going on. We're getting so emotional about something, and maybe we have to get emotional about something. Maybe that's what's required right now, but it's not going to be the end game. The end game is going to be this relationship between the information and our understanding of the information and the ability to apply it in a regenerative circumstance. And I think that's what we should be talking about, regenerative circumstances. What we're talking about is bursting bubbles. Just about everywhere you go, everyone wants to put a pin in the bubble and burst it. Boom. I just don't see that that is the answer. I think that we've got to say, well, that's going on. It's real. It's going on. The thing is that what we want to regenerate? Do we want people jumping off and smashing their brains? I don't want to regenerate that. So I want to say, why did that happen? How can we solve it? What are the points that we need to, and then intuitively resolve that? There isn't a country on this planet that hasn't had an atrocious background. There isn't any of them. No one can put their hands up and say we haven't been massively cruel or vindictive to our communities. Everyone knows that. They're just saying, please just don't be as bad as that was. And the truth is, we are getting better. And the point is that if we understand that, and we understand the power of I know a little bit about something, we might stop bursting bubbles. And I think we've got to stop bursting bubbles. We've got to get to a regenerative process. And so the second it becomes finite and you don't burst the bubble, guess what, Shepherd? Becomes one then. We're all in the same bubble. So anyway, I'll leave you guys with that. Thank you for being here. And Manu,
Thanks, brother.
Thanks.
I got to go and have my 30-minute sleep again. My